Evan was always the golden child growing up in suburban Boston. Our parents, James and Claire, had their eyes firmly fixed on him, while I, despite my best efforts, seemed to disappear into the background. It wasn't that they were outright cruel, but I was clearly treated as an afterthought in comparison. The disparity between Evan's treatment and mine was glaring, and it was something I felt deeply, even as a child. I'll never forget the day of my first science fair in 6th grade. I had poured my heart and soul into that project. For months, I worked on a model of solar system dynamics, carefully calculating orbital paths and building rotating planets. It was a true labor of love. The judges were impressed by my precision, and I won first prize. They even gave me a special commendation for my mathematical accuracy. But as I walked home, trophy in hand, my excitement was dampened. I had hoped my parents would be waiting at the door to congratulate me. Instead, I found them in the kitchen, already talking about Evan's t-ball practice. "Did you hear? Evan finally hit the ball today in practice," my mom said, glancing up from the sink. "I think he's going to be really good this year." "That's great," I said, trying to hide the disappointment in my voice. "You should have seen him, sweetie," my dad chimed in from the other room, his voice distant. "We might need to get him a new bat. The one he's using is way too small." They weren't interested in hearing about my science fair win. In fact, they didn't even ask how it went. Later that evening, I brought my trophy into the living room, hoping for some recognition. "Hey, Mom, Dad, look. I won first place at the science fair today," I said, setting the trophy down on the coffee table. "Oh, nice, honey," my mom replied without looking up from the recipe book she was flipping through. "That's wonderful." Meanwhile, Evan was sitting across the room, talking about his t-ball practice. "Well, I can't believe I finally hit the ball. Coach said I've got real potential," Evan said, his voice filled with excitement. "I'm sure you'll be a star." "Evan," my dad said, finally looking up, "you're doing great." The contrast was stark. I felt invisible. I wanted so badly for them to care about my achievement, but it seemed like the spotlight would always fall on Evan. The following day, when I went to check the living room, I noticed my trophy had been moved from the coffee table. It was now sitting on the mantel, slightly shoved aside, as if it didn't really belong. A week later, it was gone altogether, replaced by Evan's stack of participation ribbons, which proudly covered the wall like a shrine to his mediocrity. One afternoon, a few months later, I was doing my homework in the kitchen when I overheard my parents talking in the living room. "James, I've been thinking," my mom began, her voice soft. "Maybe we should move Evan up to a higher level in his classes. I don't want him to feel inferior with all of Oliver's advanced courses. I don't want him to get discouraged." "Of course, Claire," my dad agreed. "We don't want Evan to feel like he's always behind. He's trying his best. We need to support him, even if it's just practice." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Evan had C's and barely scraped by in school, while I was getting straight A's and excelling in everything I did. And yet, it was my achievements that were the problem. I stood there for a moment, unsure if I should interrupt. My hand gripped the edge of the counter, the sting of it all too much to bear. "Mom, Dad," I said, walking into the room, "why is Evan getting so much attention for his t-ball practice and his grades, while I'm the one being pushed aside?" They both looked at me, startled. "Oliver, you know we love you," my mom said, her voice too soft. "But Evan needs more support right now. He's been struggling, and we want to make sure he's okay. You're doing so well on your own. We don't want to make you feel like you're lacking. We just don't want Evan to feel bad." I felt my heart drop into my stomach. It was always Evan's needs that came first, even when his struggles were self-inflicted. They couldn't see what was right in front of them, that I was the one who had always worked hard, never asked for anything, and yet still felt invisible. "I understand," I said, turning away before they could say anything else. "I get it." As I walked away, I heard my dad mutter to my mom, "I just don't want him to feel left out." But I did feel left out, every single day, and nothing was ever going to change that. Throughout our childhood, this dynamic played out consistently. Evan's C+ grades were celebrated, while my straight A's received nothing more than distracted nods. My mother once even voiced concern that Evan might feel bad about his regular classes because I was in the advanced placement program. The disparity in how my achievements were treated versus Evan's had never been clearer than in those moments. When Evan turned 16, he received a brand new car for his birthday. My dad proudly said it was to help build his confidence, a phrase I would come to hate, as it seemed to explain away every little thing they did for him. Meanwhile, I had to juggle part-time jobs starting at 16 just to save money for college, clothes, and anything else I needed. No special car for me, No confidence boost. I had to build my own, one paycheck at a time. Graduating high school should have been a time of pride for me, but it felt more like a distant memory as I sat there, watching my parents' attention not on me, but on Evan. During the ceremony, I looked out into the crowd to find my parents, expecting their support. Instead, they were taking photos of Evan, who was sitting in the stands, bored out of his mind. He was 10. It was like the whole day was about him, not me, even though I was the one about to give the valedictorian speech. When it was time for me to announce that I'd earned an MIT scholarship, it barely even registered. I was a bit too distracted by the fact that Evan was complaining about being bored at the ceremony, and my parents seemed more interested in his complaints than the biggest moment of my academic career. Afterward, we were supposed to have a dinner to celebrate my accomplishments. Instead, it became a celebration for Evan's early baseball season. The focus shifted so quickly it made my head spin. I couldn't even get my parents to acknowledge my MIT scholarship without them deflecting it to Evan. "That's nice, honey, but did you hear Evan might make the starting pitcher next season?" my mom said, brushing aside my news as if it were nothing. That was the turning point. The moment I realized that no matter what I achieved, it would always be overshadowed by Evan. I felt invisible, like a shadow in my own family. As hard as I worked, as much as I accomplished, nothing I did would ever compare to the attention they gave Evan. They turned him into their golden child, and I was just the practice child, the test subject for their real parenting. Everything I did, every success, was simply the backdrop for his next drama. I left for MIT at 18, armed with my scholarship, savings from 3 part-time jobs, and the determination to never look back. My parents didn't even help me unpack. The same day I moved into my dorm, Evan had a summer league game, so my parents left early. It was as though I had been relegated to the background once again, even during such an important moment in my life. College was where everything changed. For the first time, I was evaluated purely on my own merits. No comparisons, no distractions. I immersed myself in the world of computer science, discovering a natural aptitude for software architecture. It was an exhilarating time of self-discovery and growth. I worked tirelessly, and when I graduated with honors, I was flooded with opportunities. Several IT organizations were eager to discuss my undergraduate thesis on distributed systems optimization, and by the time I walked across that stage, I had 5 solid job offers waiting for me. A part of me still clung to the hope that my family might finally see me for who I was, an accomplished individual with my own dreams. So, I chose a promising company in Boston, partly because it was close to home, hoping to somehow bridge the gap that had always been there. But even with this proximity, the distance between me and my family remained as wide as ever. Within 2 years, I was leading my own development team, and by my 5th year, I became the youngest senior developer in the company's history. On paper, it seemed like I was achieving everything I had dreamed of, but at home, my achievements were met with indifference. My parents were too absorbed in helping Evan navigate his 3rd major change in college to even understand what I did for a living. They were too wrapped up in his constant crises to acknowledge my success, as if everything I accomplished was nothing compared to his next step or struggle. In a way, it was a defining moment. I realized I had built my entire career without their approval or support, but that I also didn't need it. 4 years ago, everything changed for me at a tiny coffee shop near my workplace. I had been stopping by for my usual coffee, buried in work, when I met Lila. She was working as a barista while completing her teaching degree, and she had this incredible way of making each customer feel like they mattered. I started noticing that she would remember not only everyone's order, but also little personal details about them. I didn't think much of it at first. Then one day, I saw a small note scribbled on the side of my cup. "You've got this. Don't forget to breathe." It was simple but unexpected. Over the next few weeks, I realized she'd been leaving me these little messages, but I hadn't been paying enough attention. I was too consumed by work, barely looking up from my laptop. Eventually, she mentioned the notes, and we laughed about how I had never noticed them. After a bit of back and forth, she agreed to go out with me. Our first date was nothing short of amazing. We sat in a cozy restaurant for hours, discussing everything. Our families, our anxieties, our hopes for the future. And when I shared with her the pain I felt from growing up in a family where I was invisible, she listened without judgment. "They're blind," she said. "They have no idea what they were missing." For the first time, someone saw me for who I truly was. Not just as a product of my family or my past, but as an individual with my own struggles and dreams. It was like a weight had been lifted off my chest, and I knew in that moment that Lila was different. She understood in a way no one else had ever bothered to. I felt, for the first time in my life, that I wasn't just tolerated. I was truly seen. And that changed everything. The following year with Lila felt like a dream come true. We spent our days cooking extravagant meals together, discovering quirky little bookstores in Boston, and trekking through the beautiful New Hampshire landscape. She encouraged me to go after a big promotion at work, helping me prepare for interviews and supporting me through every step of the process. When I finally got the promotion, she celebrated my success more than anyone else ever had. After 14 months together, I proposed. Lila cried joyful tears when I asked her to marry me, saying she had been hoping I would. The wedding itself was small, just how we envisioned it, intimate and perfect, or so I thought. But when my family arrived, it quickly became clear that the day wasn't about us. At the reception, they spent the entire time discussing Evan's new job opportunity in California, constantly showing off a text message from him about his second interview. My mom even interrupted Lila's father's toast to mention it. In hindsight, I should have seen that as a red flag. But Lila, ever the positive force, just laughed it off, saying, "It's sweet how committed they are to Evan." For the next 3 years, our marriage was everything I could have hoped for. We started discussing the possibility of having a family, bought a beautiful condo in Cambridge, and took trips together whenever we could. Lila worked her magic and transformed our home into the cozy, welcoming space I never had as a child. Our walls were decorated with pictures from our travels, and she even planted a small container garden on our balcony. We were a great team, and she often reminded me that she would stand by me against the world. But then, last year, out of nowhere, Evan reached out. He had failed to thrive in California, and the startup culture hadn't been the right fit for him. He was coming back to Boston and sent me a long email expressing his desire to heal our relationship. He said that family should stick together and that he regretted everything. After a week of thinking it over, Lila encouraged me to give him a chance. "People evolve," she said, her voice filled with hope. "Maybe he's come to terms with his past. Maybe it's time for a fresh start." I wanted to believe her, and I did. I agreed to meet Evan for dinner, even though I had my reservations. The first meeting was a little awkward, but there was something different about it. Evan seemed more self-aware than I remembered, and he openly admitted that he'd had it easy as a child and that he regretted not being a better brother. He talked about how he wanted to make amends for all the years of rivalry and neglect. There was a sincerity in his voice that made me think there might actually be a chance for us to rebuild our relationship. A week later, I introduced him to Lila. She was excited to meet him, and they hit it off immediately. They laughed, swapped stories, and seemed to genuinely enjoy each other's company. At the time, I was glad to see them getting along, thinking that maybe the dynamics in our family were shifting. But looking back, I should have noticed something then. At first, everything seemed to be falling into place. A couple of times a week, Evan would come over for dinner. He'd bring wine, show genuine interest in my work, and we'd talk for hours. He'd even share stories about his time in California, trying to make up for lost time. I found myself appreciating the brother I never had growing up. Even more surprisingly, he started to stand up for me during Sunday dinners with our parents when they slipped into their old habits of showing Evan special treatment. It felt like a small victory, like the bridge we had been building was finally starting to stand strong. For the first time in years, I felt like I might actually have a real brother. We began spending more time together, and I started to believe that the rift in our relationship was behind us. But as I would later learn, things weren't as perfect as they appeared. Subtly, things started to shift in ways I couldn't ignore. At first, it seemed harmless. Evan would stop by our home unexpectedly, sometimes while I was still at work, and Lila would tell me that they were just hanging out. She said it was nice for her to have company while she graded papers. I didn't think much of it at first, but the visits grew more frequent, and they started spending more time together than I felt comfortable with. Evan would stay for dinner, and when I'd walk in, I'd find them laughing together, using my coffee mug, making inside jokes. It didn't sit well with me, but I brushed it off. After all, they were family. But the small signs piled up. Every time I entered the room, they would fall silent. Lila would quickly turn her phone away as if she were hiding something, and I'd catch the knowing glances exchanged between them. It felt like they were communicating on some private wavelength that I wasn't a part of. There were even strange coincidences that kept happening. I'd run into them together at the coffee shop or in the grocery store, always with some excuse as to why they were there. I tried to push the unsettling feeling down, convincing myself that I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The pregnancy announcement came shortly after. We were having dinner at home, and as expected, Evan was present when Lila shared the news. I could feel my heart swell with joy at the idea of becoming a father. But Evan's reaction was strange. He wasn't surprised at all. In fact, There was a smile on his face, almost like he'd been waiting for it. A look of knowing satisfaction crept across his expression, and for a moment, my stomach churned with a sense of foreboding. From that moment on, Evan seemed to be more present than ever. He would talk about how involved he planned to be in our child's life, often making comments about the future as if he already had a place in it. He would touch Lila's stomach without asking, sometimes with an air of ownership, like he was entitled to be part of that intimate connection. It was uncomfortable, but I tried to let it slide, telling myself I was overthinking things. Then, when I planned a romantic baby moon for just Lila and me, Evan somehow managed to invite himself. He claimed that the baby needed both of us to be involved, and Lila, surprisingly, agreed. It felt like a momentary betrayal, but I kept quiet. The signs were all there, but I refused to acknowledge them. I kept telling myself it was just me being paranoid. But deep down, I knew something was off. I still remember the night everything changed. I couldn't sleep, my mind racing as I replayed months of strange occurrences. Lila was sound asleep next to me, her phone charging quietly on the nightstand. In 6 years together, I had never once checked her phone. I believed in trust and respecting privacy. But something inside me shifted that night, and before I knew it, my hand was reaching for her phone. What I found shattered everything I thought I knew. There were hundreds of messages between Lila and Evan, stretching back over 6 months. The messages were filled with details about secret meetings in hotels, plans for the future, and their discussions about the baby. They had even started sharing a bed after Evan returned to Boston. They planned to tell me about their affair after the baby was born, assuming I would be too attached to the child to leave. The pregnancy wasn't an accident. My mind couldn't process it all at once. I read every message, my heart sinking deeper with each word. Dawn was breaking by the time I finished, and I was numb. Sitting in the reading chair, still holding her phone, I could feel the weight of betrayal settling over me like a heavy fog. When Lila woke up, it didn't take long for her to realize I knew. She started crying almost immediately, her voice trembling as she looked at me. "We didn't mean for this to happen," she said, her words barely escaping between sobs. "Evan and I, we just clicked. He understands me in ways you never could." I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. But Lila wasn't finished. "We were going to tell you," she added, her voice shaking. The excuse sounded so rehearsed, it felt hollow. "But we didn't want to hurt you. We didn't want to worry you." Her tears flowed freely now, but all I could feel was a cold emptiness. I couldn't even look at her. She seemed more concerned with her own guilt than with the devastation she had just caused me. I took a step back, trying to steady myself, but her words kept ringing in my head. I tried to push them away, but it was like they were carving a hole in my chest. There was a brief silence before she spoke again. Her voice was softer this time, almost ashamed. "After I became pregnant, I discussed it with Evan, and we decided to keep the baby and raise it with you." "That is bullshit," I spat, unable to contain the fury that had been building inside me. "You both decided this behind my back, and now you want me to pretend everything's fine? No, this is not okay." I could feel my blood boiling as I walked toward the door. I couldn't stay in that room for another second. Lila's voice was pleading, desperate, but I couldn't look at her. "Please, don't walk away. Let's talk this through." But I was done. I grabbed my phone, dialing my parents as I stepped out of the door. "Hello?" My mom's voice came through, thick with sleep. "It's me," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "I need you to listen, and I need you to listen well. I found out everything. Lila and Evan, they've been having an affair for months. And now, she's pregnant, and they want to keep the baby. They want to raise it with me." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then my mom's voice came through, slow and deliberate. "What do you want us to do about it? Besides, she did not cheat outside family." I was stunned by their response. My mother's voice came through, calm and distant. "Evan made a mistake, but now he's going to be a father," she said, as if it were that simple. "You need to forgive him. Be the bigger person." I felt my blood run cold. "The bigger person?" I repeated, almost laughing, though it was anything but funny. "You're asking me to forgive him? After everything he's done? After everything she's done?" She sighed, a long, heavy breath. "Think about the baby, honey. Think about the grandchild. This is family, and family sticks together. You can't just throw that away." I was silent for a long moment, processing her words, but they only made the hurt deeper. "You really expect me to do that? To forgive him and pretend like nothing happened?" I felt my voice break. "You're choosing them. You're protecting him again, aren't you?" She hesitated. "This isn't just about you. This is about the baby. You can't let anger destroy our family. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Our family? The one that's been picking Evan over me my entire life? The one that's always protected him, no matter what? I'm supposed to forgive all of this for some child that wasn't even supposed to exist? Mom was quiet for a long moment, and when she finally spoke, her voice was quieter, almost pleading. You need to think about your future, son. This is your chance to be a better person, to rise above the hate. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I don't need to rise above this. For once, I need to put myself first. I can't keep pretending everything's okay, and I can't pretend this family is okay either. Before she could respond, I ended the call. I couldn't hear any more of it. I was done. That day, I called a divorce attorney. I couldn't even look at Lila's face anymore. My hands shook as I made the appointment, my mind reeling from everything I had learned. It was over. I checked into a hotel that night. I needed space, away from everything, away from her. Lila called me just as I was sitting on the bed, the silence of the hotel room pressing down on me. Please, let's talk. I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. Her voice cracked, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. Not anymore. I can't do this right now, I said, feeling the exhaustion weigh on me. You made your choice. And so did I. She was silent for a moment, then spoke, her tone shifting to something colder. You're just going to walk away from everything we built? From our life, our family? Just like that? Everything we built, I repeated, my voice hard. Did we decide you will open your legs for my brother? Did we decide you will get pregnant with his child? Did we decide that? Did we? Now what about my trust? My love? You destroyed it. She let out a shaky breath, and I could hear her pacing in the background. This isn't just on me, you know? This is on you, too. You're abandoning your family when they need you the most. And you're going to let all of this fall apart. I could feel the weight of her words, but I was resolute. Screw you, bitch, don't try to pin this on me. You decided to cheat on me. You decided to get him in your bed. So, no, don't put this on me. This is on you and Evan. You made your choices. Now you can live with the consequences. I hung up before she could respond. At work, Evan tried to corner me one afternoon in the break room. His voice was too casual, almost too confident, like he was entitled to this conversation. Hey, we need to talk, man, he said, stepping in front of me before I could turn away. I took a step back, not wanting to engage, but he didn't seem to notice. It's time for us to have a real man-to-man conversation. About everything. You're not making this easy for anyone. I stared at him, feeling the bile rise in my throat. I couldn't believe how brazen he was, after everything he'd done. Don't you dare come near me again, I said, my voice low but firm. You've already taken enough from me. He raised his eyebrows, as if he didn't understand what I meant. We were family, dude. You don't get to walk away from that. I shook my head. Family? After everything you've done? You've crossed a line. I'm reporting this. I turned and walked straight to HR. Within the hour, security was escorting Evan out of the building. The last thing I heard from him was a half-hearted, "This isn't over." The divorce process, though, was a nightmare. Lila and Evan's defense of their actions was as cold as it was manipulative. He wasn't there for me, not like Evan was, Lila claimed, sitting across from me in the mediator's office. Her voice wavered, but there was no emotion behind it. He's domineering and emotionally unavailable. I didn't feel heard in our marriage. I didn't feel loved. I looked at her, disbelief written all over my face. You're blaming me for your affair? I said, my voice barely above a whisper. This is how you justify it. Her eyes flickered, a mix of guilt and defiance. You never paid attention to my needs. Evan understood me in a way you never did. I felt my blood boil, but I didn't say anything, not yet. It would have been useless. Then it got worse. My parents, of all people, testified in favor of Lila and Evan. Mom, with her unwavering devotion to her younger son, spoke up first. Oliver has always been difficult. He's jealous of Evan, always has been, she said. He never supported Evan the way he should have. Oliver's the reason they struggled growing up. He should have been more considerate. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You're choosing them over me again? After everything? She wouldn't look me in the eye. You're too stubborn. You need to let go of your pride. Maybe if you just listened to Evan and Lila, none of this would have happened. I felt my stomach churn. You don't even see what's happening here, do you? They've destroyed everything. And you're still protecting them. You always will. My father added, his voice tight. Sometimes, people need a wake-up call. You should have been more understanding. Lila needed emotional support. At that point, I couldn't take it anymore. The entire process felt like I was being dragged through mud, and they were cheering on the people who had betrayed me. My voice cracked as I looked at the mediator. I'm done negotiating. There's nothing left to discuss. I stood up, my fists clenched at my sides. This ends now. I walked out of the room without looking back. When we went to court, Lila secured a decent settlement. In Massachusetts, having an affair with your husband's brother didn't impact alimony, which felt like an unjust loophole. Despite everything, though, I managed to preserve the condo and most of my income. Small victories in the grand scheme of things, but they were victories nonetheless. At 34 years old, I found myself divorced, completely estranged from my family. I had changed my email, blacklisted their numbers, and even instructed building security to refuse them entry if they showed up at my door. It was the only way I could protect myself from their constant intrusion, their entitlement to my life, to my pain. Some days, when the silence of the condo feels too heavy, I wonder if there was anything I could have done differently. Could I have been a better spouse, a better brother, a better son? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know anymore. But then I remember that I wasn't the one who deceived everyone. I wasn't the one who betrayed my partner and my family. I didn't tear our bonds apart. Turning family against family wasn't my doing, no matter how hard they tried to make me the villain. No matter how hard they twisted the narrative to make it seem like I was the problem. People often say that karma catches up with everyone, but I'm not sure if that's true. I'm not sure it works that way. Some people can do awful things without ever facing any consequences. What I do know, though, is that I'm tired of being the family's scapegoat. I'm tired of shouldering the weight of their mistakes, of trying to be the one who fixes everything while they ruin it all. I don't owe them anything anymore. Not my time, not my energy, not my forgiveness. It's time to let go and move on. To stop wondering if I could have done better, because in the end, I did my best with what I had. And that's enough. I'm tired of having to be understanding while everyone else gets away with ruining lives. My entire life, I've been the one who's overlooked, the second choice, the afterthought. Not anymore. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, they took an even stranger turn. I assumed that after I cut off communication with my family post-divorce, they would finally leave me alone. It's been about a month since everything fell apart, and I've been focused on getting better and moving on. The peace I'd been craving seemed within reach, but I should have known better. They had different plans. Yesterday morning, in the middle of an important meeting with my development team, the office receptionist messaged me. She said my mother, Claire, was in the lobby and insisted on seeing me. Apparently, she'd been there for over an hour, telling everyone she just needed to speak to her son. My team, having seen Evan's previous outburst at work, could tell I was uneasy. They exchanged worried glances, but I refused to let them see just how much the situation was shaking me. I ignored the receptionist's message, hoping it would go away, but soon, my phone started ringing incessantly with calls from unknown numbers. The voicemail notifications piled up. It seemed my mother had enlisted other family members to try to contact me, trying to wear me down. I sat at the conference table, trying to focus on the presentation in front of me, but all I could hear was the relentless buzzing of my phone. I felt trapped. Oliver, my colleague Robert said, noticing my distraction. You okay? He looked at me with concern, his voice quiet enough not to disrupt the meeting. I forced a smile and nodded. Yeah, I'm fine. Just dealing with some personal stuff. I could tell Robert wasn't convinced, but he let it slide. The meeting dragged on, but my thoughts were elsewhere. It wasn't just my mother. It was the whole family, making one last-ditch attempt to break down the walls I'd carefully built up. The guilt trips, the manipulation, the reminders of the past. They all came flooding back. By the time the meeting was over, I had a dozen missed calls, 5 voicemails, and a message from my mother pleading for me to come downstairs and talk to her. I couldn't bring myself to respond. It was clear they weren't respecting the boundaries I had set, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep them at bay. I wanted to stay strong. I had made it this far without them, without their drama, their chaos. But the weight of it was starting to crush me again. How could I make them understand that I needed peace, not more of the same? Would they ever stop treating me like their punching bag, their scapegoat? I walked out of the office, my thoughts racing. The only thing that felt certain in that moment was that this fight, this war with my family, was far from over. One day, I received a call from an unknown number. I thought it might be work-related, so I answered one call, only to hear my Aunt Linda, 54, on the other end. We hadn't spoken in years, and instead of greeting me, she jumped straight into it. Your brother and Lila are really struggling. Evan still hasn't found a job, and the settlement money is running low. My parents' golden boy couldn't land a job. It seems no one wants to hire him now. His reputation had taken a massive hit after his affair with Lila became public, and the details somehow spread within his professional network. Background checks led several prospective employers to withdraw their offers. I couldn't help but notice the irony in it all. Finally, his actions had real consequences, something I had hoped would happen from the start. A part of me wanted to feel vindicated, but it felt hollow. I'd paid the price for his mistakes, and now he was facing his own. But then Aunt Linda continued, and the absurdity of it all reached new heights. You know, Oliver, your parents have been covering a lot for them. They've been paying for groceries, rent, and even Lila's prenatal medical expenses. Your dad's retirement savings are quickly depleting. They're in a panic about running out of money. They need your help. They want you to step in and support them. The words blurred together in my mind as I processed what she was asking. They wanted me to financially support the woman who betrayed me and the brother who had destroyed my marriage. It was like some twisted joke that I could barely believe. Wait, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You're telling me that after everything that's happened, after all of this mess, they want me to help them out? They want me to bail out Lila and Evan? Aunt Linda sighed, her voice softening. Oliver, I know it's a lot to ask, but your parents are really struggling. They've always been there for you. I think they need you now, especially with the baby coming. My stomach churned. I was supposed to help them? Help her? I couldn't wrap my head around it. The last thing I ever wanted was to be dragged back into their chaos, to enable the very people who had ripped my life apart. I'm sorry, Aunt Linda, but I can't do that. I'm not going to reward betrayal or try to fix a mess that's not mine to fix. This is on them. There was a pause before Aunt Linda spoke again. I understand, Oliver, but just think about it, okay? Your parents. They're just asking for a little help. I felt my anger rising. They should have thought about all of this before they let this mess happen. I'm done. Besides, if you have so much sympathy for them, go ahead and help them with the money. Don't call me again with this. I ended the call, feeling the weight of the conversation pressing down on me. How could they think I'd be the one to clean up after all of this? How could they expect me to carry the burden for people who had betrayed me at every turn? It was clear now. No matter how much I tried to move on, they would never leave me alone. My mother didn't just show up at my office randomly. She had a plan. She ambushed me there, knowing I wouldn't return their calls. Threatening to stay until closing time, she delivered a speech about forgiveness and family duty. When I finally went down to the lobby to address the issue, she conveniently forgot that I had to pay my own way through college. You've always been the responsible one, Oliver, she started, her voice smooth but insistent. Your father and I have always provided for both our sons, but now it's time for you to take charge and support your brother through this tough time. I could feel my jaw tightening. You're asking me to support the woman who ruined my marriage and the brother who tore my life apart? She paused for a moment, her eyes narrowing. Evan made a mistake. We all make mistakes, Oliver. You need to be the bigger person. Family is everything. The bigger person? I shot back, my voice rising. Family? You've done nothing but enable him for years. And now, after everything that's happened, you want me to clean up his mess? And hers? My mother stepped forward, trying to calm me with a soothing hand on my arm. I'm not asking for everything, just help. You've always been successful. You have the means. I worked for everything I have. Mom, you didn't provide for me the way you're doing for Evan. I've been on my own since I was 18, working multiple jobs, scraping by, and dealing with you turning a blind eye to the favoritism and enabling of Evan's behavior, I said, fighting to keep my emotions in check. You're asking me to bail out two people who have completely disregarded me. She shook her head, her voice taking on a pleading tone. You're the one who's being selfish, Oliver. It's not just about what you want. It's about what's right. I'm done. You can't guilt-trip me into this. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A tough time. I shook my head, incredulous. My wife got pregnant after Evan had an affair with her, and now he's trying to claim the child as his own. That wasn't a rough patch. It was a deliberate series of decisions. Mom's expression faltered, but she quickly recovered, her tone defensive. Well, if you had paid more attention to Lila's needs before... I didn't let her finish. Before what? Before she betrayed me with my brother? I interrupted, my voice rising with frustration. You think I wasn't paying attention? I was right there, working my ass off to build something for us, and all the while, my brother was systematically destroying everything I cared about. She opened her mouth to speak again, but I held up my hand. I don't want to hear it anymore. With a deep breath, I pulled out my phone and hit the security number. I need someone from security down here immediately, I said, my voice steady but firm. I felt my pulse pounding in my ears as I turned back to face her. You need to leave, Mom. I'm done. She looked at me, shock and hurt evident in her eyes. Oliver, please, you don't mean that. This is your family. We're just asking for a little help. You don't get to ask anything from me after everything you've done, I said, feeling the weight of the words sink in. I'm leaving my brother and his unborn child behind. I can't be a part of this anymore. Mom's face fell, but before she could respond, security arrived, escorting her out without another word. I stood there, taking a breath, trying to steady myself after the emotional toll of the confrontation. As I walked back to my office, I couldn't help but feel like I just made the most difficult decision of my life. Despite my refusal, some of my coworkers found it humiliating when she left. Later that evening, Evan emailed me from a new account to bypass my blocks. I read through Evan's email, my eyes scanning the words with a mix of disbelief and anger. The half-hearted apology felt more like a pretense, a means to soften the blow of their true intentions. He tried to mask his request for financial help with hollow words about regret and responsibility. The stress is affecting the baby, Oliver. Lila's been under a lot of pressure, and it's not fair to the child, he wrote, his words dripping with guilt-inducing manipulation. We can't afford proper medical care, and we're at a loss for what to do. We need your help, for the baby's sake. I scoffed, shaking my head in disgust, as if I would be moved by their feigned concern for the child, a child that never should have existed under these circumstances. The sonogram image attached was the final insult. It was like a punch to the gut. The image of a tiny baby, barely formed, now serving as a weapon to guilt me into helping them. I stared at the screen for a long moment, trying to control my breathing, but the knot in my stomach tightened. This was the result of their betrayal, of their choices. And now they were asking for my support? I could almost hear Evan's voice in my head as I pictured him and Lila, likely sitting together, concocting their plan. Send him the sonogram, he must have told her. It'll get to him. It's his family's future. But it wasn't about the baby. It was about them trying to manipulate me into taking care of the fallout of their actions. And I wasn't about to let them pull me back into their web of lies. I sat back in my chair, closing my eyes for a moment, trying to silence the whirlwind of emotions that clouded my mind. This was my breaking point. I was done being the one who always had to pick up the pieces, done being the one they turned to when they needed something. With a steady hand, I typed out my reply. Evan, I don't know what you think you'll accomplish with this, but I'm done. I'm not going to support you or Lila in any way. The situation you created is yours to deal with, and I'm not responsible for fixing the mess you've made. The child is not my responsibility. You both made your choices, and now you must live with the consequences. Your ex-brother Oliver. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then stared at the screen, feeling a cold sense of finality wash over me. The following morning, I woke up to a message from building management informing me that my father had been in the lobby for 2 hours. He was apparently telling anyone who would listen how I was being heartless and selfish to live a comfortable life alone, and how I was making Evan and his family suffer. I didn't bother responding at first. There was nothing to say. But when I got home from work, I found out just how far he'd gone. The receptionist, clearly uncomfortable, told me he'd been insisting on speaking with me, and when he was denied, he started ranting to anyone who'd listen, blaming me for the situation. I didn't need to hear any more. I called building management immediately and explained what had been happening. I'd like to formally request that my family members be banned from the building, I said, trying to keep my voice calm but firm. They are no longer welcome here, and I don't want any further disruptions. The manager hesitated before responding. Of course, Oliver. We'll make a note of it and make sure no one enters without your permission. It was uncomfortable, to say the least, to have to go to these lengths. I had never thought I would have to take such drastic steps to keep my family out of my life. But this wasn't just a petty family feud. This was about my own peace and my ability to move forward. When I returned home later that night, I had the feeling of being under constant scrutiny. I could almost hear my father's voice, narrating to anyone who would listen about how I was being unreasonable, about how I was making everything worse for Evan and Lila. It was hard not to feel like a villain in their eyes, even though I knew what they were doing was manipulative. I had already blocked their numbers, changed my email, and done everything I could to distance myself. And now, I was taking this step, knowing it would cause more tension and backlash. But I had no choice. The situation has escalated to a level I didn't anticipate. Lila has been posting on social media, painting a picture of me as some heartless villain who abandoned her during her pregnancy. She's been vague but forceful enough with her words that anyone reading might believe she's the victim in all of this. I never expected this from someone I loved. One post reads, with the implication that I've turned my back on her and the baby. The audacity of it all leaves me speechless. Evan, of course, has been reposting these with commentary, as though it's some noble cause. I caught one post where he said, sometimes, you have to sacrifice your own well-being for family. It's almost comical. He's the one who destroyed the foundation of this so-called family, yet here he is, acting like I owe them anything. And worse still, he's posting about how much they're struggling, expecting sympathy, as though they have any right to it after everything they've done. What kills me is how they've completely twisted the narrative. Somehow, I'm the villain for not rushing in to save them from the consequences of their betrayal. All because I've managed to build a life for myself professionally, while they wallow in the mess they've made. It's maddening, and it feels like every time I think I can get a moment of peace, they find a new way to target me. I can't ignore this, though. I've started keeping a detailed record of everything. Every email they send, every social media post, and even the issues at work. My lawyer has advised me to be ready for anything. She's especially concerned that they might try to manipulate the legal system to squeeze more support out of me, claiming some false version of events. It's infuriating, but I know I need to be prepared. Each time I think it can't get worse, it does. But I refuse to let them win. I won't be the scapegoat anymore. It's been overwhelming, to say the least. The constant messages from family friends and distant relatives have been like an added layer of pressure. Everyone seems to think that because we share blood, I should just sweep everything under the rug and let it go. Family first, they say, but none of them ever asked the same of Evan and Lila. None of them offer to step in and help my brother or the woman who destroyed my marriage. They all want me to be the bigger person, but when I turn the tables and ask them to step up and be the bigger person and rather than calling me, why don't you give them some money to do the right thing for once? They vanish. It's as if the only person expected to make sacrifices is me. I've stood my ground, though. I refuse to let them manipulate me into giving them what they want. But I'll admit, the constant harassment is starting to wear me down. I feel like I'm in a constant battle, one I never asked for, one I can't seem to escape. No matter how many times I shut down the requests, they keep coming, from every angle. To cope with everything, I've started seeing a therapist. At least someone is listening to me, even if it's not my family. It helps, but sometimes it feels like the weight of everything is just too much. I'm even considering a major change, moving to a different city, maybe even a new job. I'm not sure I want to run from this mess, but there's this gnawing feeling that I'll never truly find peace here, not as long as they keep dragging me back into it. The truth is, I feel lost. My own family has sunk to a level I never imagined they would, and yet here we are. They're not asking for help. They're trying to manipulate and intimidate me into giving money to the very people who ruined my life. The worst part is that I sense this isn't over yet. Their desperation is palpable, and desperate people, as we all know, do desperate things. I can't shake the feeling that this is just the beginning. Suddenly, I received a notice from my former attorney informing me that Evan and Lila were attempting to sue me for additional support, citing escalating medical needs and altered circumstances. My lawyer, who had been keeping track of all their harassment, was both furious and fully prepared. As the courtroom drama unfolded, it felt surreal. Lila's exaggerated pregnant belly and Evan's ill-fitting suit didn't quite mask the manipulative aura that surrounded them. Our parents, seated behind them, exchanged smug looks, as if they were silently cheering on the very people who had torn our family apart. Their lawyer was the first to speak, and his arguments were almost laughable. He painted the situation as one of hardship, claiming that the initial settlement had been insufficient due to the emotional toll of the divorce. The defendant's behavior, he said, with a pointed glance at me, has caused irreparable damage to the family, and the mental distress has, as we all know, a direct impact on Lila's health and the baby. He went on to say that my alleged vindictive actions were so severe that they had resulted in Lila developing high-risk complications, necessitating specialized care. I couldn't help but scoff at the absurdity. When it was my lawyer's turn, the tide shifted dramatically. She started with the surveillance footage, showing clear images of my mother's outbursts in the lobby, Evan's aggressive behavior towards security, and even Lila's attempts to sneak into the building through the back door. The court was silent as the footage played, the undeniable truth in every frame. Then my lawyer presented the social media evidence. She displayed a timeline of posts and messages that revealed how Evan and Lila had been harassing me online, trying to manipulate public opinion in their favor. The evidence was damning. My lawyer didn't stop there. She pulled out financial records, showing that Evan had, in fact, rejected multiple job offers. It wasn't because he couldn't find work, as they claimed, but because he felt the positions weren't good enough for him. He thought he deserved better. Lila's records were the final blow. Despite their claim of needing specialized medical care, my lawyer showed the court Lila's prenatal records. The pregnancy was perfectly healthy, with no indication of any complications that would require anything more than normal care. She had declined a full-time teaching job, preferring to maintain her current unemployed, pregnant status. Your Honor, my lawyer concluded, they have been using this pregnancy, this child, as a pawn in their attempt to manipulate the defendant into further financial support. There is no evidence to support their claims, and they have failed to demonstrate any legitimate need beyond what was already agreed upon. Lila's face flushed with anger, but there was no denying the weight of the evidence against them. My parents, who had been silently nodding along, seemed to shrink in their seats. Evan's smugness faded into frustration, and for the first time, I felt a glimmer of relief. The judge's expression was one of clear disapproval. As their lawyer began making the case for emotional distress as grounds for more financial support, the judge cut him off sharply, saying, "Do you really want to continue down this path? Your clients appear to have committed perjury." The tension in the courtroom was palpable. After a short recess, their lawyer returned, his face drawn and grim. Evan looked pale, while Lila was visibly shaking with tears in her eyes. Their earlier display of solidarity had completely unraveled. When the judge delivered his verdict, it was a moment of unexpected relief for me. He not only rejected their motion for more support, but also reduced my alimony payments by a staggering 60%. Parties who abuse the legal system are not looked upon kindly by this court, he said. Mr. Smith appears to be the victim of a well-orchestrated scheme to exploit him financially and emotionally. The fallout from the court ruling came quickly. Lila, no longer reliant on me, decided to go back to work once Evan unexpectedly landed a job in retail. It seemed their plans were shifting now that the financial strain had lessened. However, the final blow came from my parents. In their last message, they accused me of ruining Evan's last opportunity and declared they would never forgive me for abandoning the family. They argued that the differences between us were irreconcilable, citing a breakdown in trust and honesty. On top of that, their attorney had resigned from representing them, signaling the end of their legal battle. At work, my organization took swift action. They increased security around the office and officially banned my parents from the premises. As the situation unraveled, I learned that my parents had taken out a second mortgage to cover legal fees, putting themselves in further financial strain. Meanwhile, Evan and Lila were embroiled in constant arguments over money, as told by mutual acquaintances. Now, with the financial burden lifted and my alimony payments reduced, I'm beginning to breathe again. I've started rebuilding my savings and am seriously considering a job offer in Seattle. I've come to realize that sometimes, the best form of retaliation is simply letting people face the consequences of their own actions. But even though things have calmed down for now, I can't shake the feeling that this story is far from over. Aunt Linda's sudden outreach left me feeling conflicted. She had always stayed out of the family drama, which made me think maybe she had a different perspective, but after hearing her out, I regretted it. Her first approach was to express concern, saying, "Your father isn't getting any younger. His health is deteriorating because of all this stress." She quickly shifted to telling me how my parents had to refinance their home to cover Evan and Lila's expenses. The implication was clear. Families should always stick together, no matter the circumstances. When I didn't react with the sympathy she expected, she changed tactics. "Did you know your mother cries herself to sleep every night?" she asked, her tone almost pleading. "Even though they may have treated you poorly as a child, they are still your parents. And Evan is still your brother. Despite everything that's happened, I couldn't hold it in anymore." "What exactly are you referring to?" I asked, cutting her off. "The months he spent sleeping with my wife, getting her pregnant, and then trying to claim the child as his own? That's what happened." Aunt Linda's response was nothing short of shocking. She suggested, "Well, maybe you should have been more involved in your marriage." Then, in a bizarre twist, she claimed that my childhood jealousy of Evan had created a toxic environment, one that supposedly drove them together. The absurdity of it was almost laughable, and I couldn't help but laugh out loud. I couldn't believe that yet another family member was trying to manipulate me into shouldering the blame for Evan and Lila's actions. But this time, I wasn't shaken. "Linda," I said calmly, "if you're so concerned about their financial situation, why don't you help them yourself? Your husband's legal practice is doing well, and you own 3 rental properties. Why is it that I'm the only one expected to support them?" Her silence was immediate, and when she finally spoke, she stammered, saying I had a special obligation as Evan's brother. I raised an eyebrow, asking, "Why haven't you stepped in earlier, and why are you choosing sides now?" I could feel her discomfort through the phone. "You came to me, demanding I pay for their mistakes instead of holding them accountable," I added, my voice steady. There was a long pause before she muttered something about family loyalty. I had no time for empty rhetoric anymore. My patience had run out. Linda seemed to think she had a winning argument when she said, "Your father is considering retiring early due to stress. The house may have to be sold. Is that what you want to see happen? Seeing your parents lose everything because you're too proud to help?" I stayed calm and responded with precision. "No, Linda. They're losing everything because they condoned Evan's actions. They, like Evan and Lila, are paying the price for their own decisions. And no, I'm not responsible for fixing it. As far as I am concerned, my father, my mother, and my brother are already dead. They are just waiting to be buried." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. She was clearly taken aback, but then, in a last-ditch attempt to guilt me, she said, "When you're older and alone, family is all you have. You'll regret this." I wasn't shaken by her words. "I'm already older, Linda. I've learned the hard way that family can be the most toxic thing if it's built on manipulation and guilt. So, Linda, stop with the crap and go help your brother and his family." She hung up, and that was the last I heard from her. The manipulation was finally over. I blocked her number and hung up, but strangely, the conversation brought me clarity. For the first time, I felt truly free from the guilt and obligations that had weighed on me since childhood. Later that day, I accepted the job offer in Seattle. The change of scenery feels right, especially with the promotion the firm is offering. I'm starting fresh and selling the condo. Yesterday, my coworkers threw me a farewell party. During the most challenging months of my life, I came to understand what true support really looks like. A friend of mine summed it up perfectly when they said, "Your worth isn't determined by those who couldn't see it." I was deeply touched when my closest colleague gave me a card signed by everyone at work. It meant more to me than I can express. This experience has taught me that family isn't just defined by blood ties. It's about the mutual support, respect, and trust we give and receive. The people who stood by me, my coworkers who had my back, and most importantly, myself, have shown me what real family is. Sitting in the silence of my empty condo, surrounded by boxes that hold fragments of a life I'm ready to leave behind, feels oddly appropriate. Tomorrow, the journey west begins. Physically, yes, but also emotionally. I'm shedding the weight of years spent entangled in family drama, betrayal, and heartbreak. It's as if I'm driving away from the past, from the people who couldn't see me for who I was, from the hurt that clung to me long after it should have faded. Yes, the baby was born last week. I know that much, though I don't care to know the details. I haven't asked, haven't even looked for a photo or a message. That part of my life is over. I've made a choice to cut those ties completely again. It feels like the right decision, even though it wasn't easy. But as I pack the last of my belongings into my car and head toward a new beginning, there's a sense of relief that comes with closing this chapter. I'm not looking back. Not this time. 5 years later, sitting in my living room, holding my daughter Emma in my arms as she babbled happily, I couldn't help but smile. My life now was a stark contrast to the pain and turmoil I had lived through. Brenda, my wife, was in the kitchen preparing dinner, humming softly to herself. I watched her from across the room, feeling a deep sense of contentment that I hadn't known was possible. It wasn't just about the quiet moments like this one, though. It was the feeling of being seen for who I was, not as a man burdened by mistakes made by others, but as someone deserving of love and happiness. Brenda didn't judge me for my past. She loved me for who I had become, and in her, I found someone who built me up instead of tearing me down. As for Evan, well, his story had taken a dramatic turn. After trying to harass one of his coworkers for sex, his actions finally caught up with him. The company had no choice but to fire him, and to make matters worse, he was arrested when he tried to intimidate the coworker into withdrawing her complaint. It was the final nail in the coffin for his career and reputation. I couldn't say I felt sorry for him, not after everything he had done to me, my marriage, and now to a coworker. And then there was Lila. After Evan's mess caught up to him, Lila finally left him. She filed for divorce, taking their child with her. Part of me wanted to feel for the child, but I couldn't. Lila had played her part in destroying my family, and the only person I could focus on now was Emma, my daughter, who had no idea what kind of mess had preceded her arrival. My parents, of course, begged Lila to stay, to work things out with Evan. But she left anyway. They came to me afterward, trying to guilt-trip me into reconnecting, insisting that family was all that mattered. But the truth was, I had built a new family, a real one. Brenda, Emma, and me. We had our own rhythm now, and I couldn't let my parents tear that down. So, when they reached out, I shut them down. I didn't even respond to their attempts. They had made their choices, and now they were reaping the consequences. It wasn't my responsibility to fix them or their mess anymore. I had enough of being the one who always had to clean up after everyone else. As I watched Emma play with her toys on the floor, Brenda's laughter filling the air as she carried dinner to the table, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. It had taken years of heartache and frustration, but I had finally found peace. I had learned that family wasn't about obligation. It was about love, respect, and choosing the people who truly care for you. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged.